Hello. So today my debate will be over the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act of 2004. This act talks about how all children have the right to free public schooling, whether they have a disability or not. This entails that all their basic needs are met from an educational standpoint, and sometimes they are not met the way that they are needed. I have provided a basic outline of how this act has come to be and some of the consequences that it has for the students that are in it. So it started in May of 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, and it decided it was unconstitutional for educational institutes to segregate children by race. And it followed into April 1965. The Elementary and Secondary Act signed and called for equal access to education and funding for those in poverty, so it had yet to cover the basis of children with disabilities. In October of 1971, the Pennsylvania Association for Retarded Children versus Commonwealth ruled for students with disabilities to be placed in publicly funded school settings to meet their needs. But in 1972, there was a congressional investigation set to uncover how many children that were in need of special education were really in the school setting and getting their needs met. They found that 8 million children need special education settings, and about 3.9 million met the educational standards that they needed. 2.5 million had substandard education, and the remaining 1.75 million were not even in school. In November of 1975, Education for All Handicapped Children Act was signed and stated that states accepting federal government money were required to provide equal access to education and one free meal per day. On October of 1976, there was an amendment added to this act for states to provide services to family of children born with a disability, and before it was only after the age of 3 were they allowed to provide services to these families. In August of 1986, Handicapped Children's Protection Act was signed and gave parents more say in their child's education plan. In January of 1990, traumatic brain injury and autism were added as new disability categories, which autism should have been on the spectrum already. In June of 1997, Education for All Handicapped Children Act became the Individuals with Disability Act, and then in 2004, Congress called for early interventions, and it required local school districts to shift up to 15% of the special needs funds to general education, so they could not place everybody and anybody in the special needs classes. And this is the 45th anniversary of this Disabilities Act, and children are still falling through the cracks of the education system. So through testing, the tests are only as good as the administrators that handle it, and it's one of the major setbacks that could be very beneficial to some of the kids. To top that, if an educator does not recognize that a student is having trouble, then their ability to get tested could be too late, so they're not actually getting the help for what they need. And then in the timeline, it talked about how IEPs are created and set in place for children with disabilities. But the trouble with these is, for most of the time, some kids do not get the services that they need when they need it. And when schools get audited, they want to make their kids and themselves look better. So they will say on paper that the students are getting their needs and goals met, when really they're not. And I have personal experience where I have a relative who was just diagnosed. He's in kindergarten, and when he was having a breakdown, everything that they had set in place for him, nobody was available, so he ended up getting suspended. And of course these kids don't understand that, so how are you supposed to tell them like they can't do these certain things when it's all they know? And then even though these kids have the right to public education, sometimes the benefits that they need and the services, they're not provided the right way. So you could have a very intellectually gifted child who is not socially aware and struggles behaviorally, and they are put into the wrong setting solely based on the fact that they have those behavioral issues. Lastly, parents. In the timeline, I said that yes, they are more a part of their child's act and they have more say. But it actually, if parents do not know the right questions to ask, then they're really not an equal part of their child's plan because they don't know what needs are being met in the long run. And when parents want to see something they deem appropriate, the school board might not see that as appropriate as well. So there's a lot of conflict that can arise through the parents and the school district. So even with all the changes that have been made over the past 45 years to try and help these kids, they're still falling through the cracks of a broken school system, whether the child has a disability or not. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to protect the rights of children to have free public education and to ensure that all children receive the support and service they need.